Hey, what's up, my people? John Middlekauff, new YouTube channel. What I need you to do, subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, share with your friends. Appreciate everyone that has. It's the podcast, 3 and Out. You can listen wherever you listen to podcasts. Apple, Spotify. We got you covered. Also, thevolume.com. We got merch right here. FlexFit hat. Go to thevolume.com. Get yourself a 3 and Out hat. Okay, we got some breaking news today. Steve Wilks, the 49ers defensive coordinator, was relieved of his duties per Kyle Shanahan. So we will dive into, why this happened. Did he lose support of the players? And who's going to be the next defensive coordinator? This is currently the Super Bowl favorite for 2024. Which is crazy. I mean, the Chiefs have just won back-to-back. They're obviously the second favorite. But this is, a big-time job. And we got guys like Bill Belichick, Mike Vrabel, Rex Ryan, Pete Carroll. Got some defensive names out there. Brandon Staley. So we will dive into all things the 49ers defensive coordinator position. Some thoughts on dynasties and dominant players and how important they are to the health of the sport. And then I wanted to dive into something the waste management debacle that happened over the weekend in terms of the party getting a little out of control. So we will talk about that. But first, before we dive into all the stuff going on in the world, let's tell you about my friends. And they happen to be my friends in the official ticketing app of this podcast, Gametime. Gametime is very, very easy to use. Just go to your smartphone, go to your iPad, and download the app. When you do, you want to go to a game. The NCAA tournament is right around the corner. You want to go to spring training in Florida, in Arizona. I highly recommend it. Went for spring training last year for the first time in my life. It's freaking awesome. Very chill. Get outside, get some sun, enjoy yourself. We'll do it on us. Download that app, buy a pair of tickets, promo code John. That's John. Promo code John. John. Get $20 off. Enjoy yourself a pair of tickets. Steve Wilks fired. Let me start by saying this. I think he would have been fired whether they won or lost the game on Sunday. I truly believe that. I don't think the outcome of the game determined his fate. I think he would have been fired in the middle of the season when Kirk Cousins looked like Peyton Manning. When Joe Burrow, I was in Vegas. I went out with Greg Papa, who's the voice of the 49ers. He's done it for like 5 years. Before that, he was the voice of the Raiders for over 2 decades. This guy has been watching football games live for over 2.5 decades as a broadcaster. He and I've been going to these games a lot less longer than him, and he said it's the best game he's ever seen live. Joe Burrow. It was incredible. It's easily one of the better quarterback games I've ever seen on television. I wasn't at the game. Steve Wilks was getting shredded. And I'll never forget, in the middle of the season, Kyle Shanahan, they made him come from the booth down to the sideline. And I said, this thing is not going to end well. And then a couple weeks ago, before the Super Bowl, Ben Johnson looked like Mike Shanahan meets Kyle Shanahan meets Andy Reid and was absolutely carving him up. It was over. It really was. And listen, Kyle Shanahan has hired 3 defensive coordinators. Robert Saleh, DeMeco Ryans, and Steve Wilks. He's 2 for 3, right? If he was a professional baseball player, he'd be the greatest hitter of all time. If he was a hedge fund manager, he'd be one of the richest investors of all time. 2 for 3 is not bad. Like, you are not going to go 100% on hiring coaches. He missed. He simply missed. Once DeMeco left, they didn't have anyone on the staff to promote. You get credit for DeMeco, who started for him as a quality control coach and went on to be a stud head coach. But they hired Steve Wilks, and it backfired. He wasn't good enough. Period, point blank, end of story. This is also not an easy job, right? You're not taking over the Jags. You're not taking over the Minnesota Vikings. The expectation here is simple. Win the biggest games in January and attempt to win the Super Bowl. And they were winning the games in January, holding on for dear life, right? And it's not all his fault. And I see this scapegoating. It's not scapegoating. Kyle needs to be better too. But Steve Wilks was not good enough. This was not a sustainable problem that was going to get fixed this offseason and moving forward. They had to pull the trigger, and they had to pull the trigger now. Now, we'll get into some of the potential, guys that could fill this spot, but Steve Wilks wasn't coming back for the 49ers in 2024, probably in like week 10, let alone the Super Bowl situation, right? But let's face it, in that game, Kyle was not perfect by any means. Steve Wilks, as the game went on, was the mark. And Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes ran circles around him. Now, listen, his whole thing is, he's a little bit more of a blitz-heavy guy that clearly made Kyle uncomfortable. Here's the problem with blitzing. Steve Spagnuolo blitzes. They work. Steve Wilks was blitzing. They weren't even close to getting home. I don't think any coach has an issue with a quote-unquote blitz. Do they fucking work? Steve Wilks's did not. In the Super Bowl, he wasn't close to touching the quarterback. Led to enormous plays. When Spags blitzed, he annihilated the quarterback. He annihilated the offense. Why? Obviously, he's a much better coach. But I don't feel any sympathy. I'm sure some of the radical takes that you'll see over the next 24 hours will be outrageous. You can mark that in the bag. But I don't feel bad for guys getting paid 7 figures to go away. I mean, the average coordinator in the NFL defense is making $2 or $3 million. So usually signs a multi-year contract. Like a lot of guys, a lot of coaches in the sport of football, are running a pretty good scam. I'm not saying Steve Wilks is some awful coach, but I listen, this move had to happen. And when you think about this, the 49ers are not the New England Patriots, right? Kyle is the boss. He's the guy at the top of the hierarchy. But when it comes to the defensive side of the ball, this isn't just Belichick not listening to anyone doing whatever he wants. Kyle Shanahan would not have made this move if Fred Warner and Nick Bosa thought this guy was good. Now, I'm not saying they went into his office and said, fire the guy. But if they were clearly on board with him and believers in him, Steve Wilks would be the coach. I said this at the time when the team was falling apart in the middle of the season. They lost 3 straight games and Steve Wilks was getting worked. Players don't believe in this guy. They're out on everything that's going on. And when I meant that, I meant their star players. I'm not talking the role players. I don't care about them. You are led by your highest paid elite Pro Bowl level guys. And they happen to have 2 of the better players in the league in Warner and Nick Bosa. Now, I'm not saying they disliked the guy, but this league's about executing at the highest level against Ben Johnson, against Andy Reid, against the best schemes, against the best offensive players. And there's a small percentage of guys that can do it. And for Nick Bosa and Fred Warner and the rest of the guys on that defense, they just had clearly one of the best defensive coordinators in the league in DeMeco Ryans for 2 seasons. Even Robert Saleh, who I don't even think was as good as DeMeco, was pretty damn good. So they know what it looks like. And when you get a guy who's not as good, listen, anyone in any industry, whether you change jobs, whether you start working with someone new, you know right away, like, yeah, this guy's not as good as the other guy I worked for. Or damn, this guy's way better. We're all human beings. Anything professionally, anyone worth their salt, you're constantly judging and evaluating the people you're working with. Are they good enough? Can we get to the next level? Can we make more money? Can we take our company from X to Y? Can we double revenue? Can we figure out this product, this, computer, whatever it may be, right? And these guys know the highest level because that's what DeMeco was. He's a top 5 defensive coordinator in the league. And like I said, going 2 for 3 in a lot of industries, you're a Hall of Famer, you're a super rich guy. But for this, Kyle Shanahan, it hurts, right? And I think, like I said, right move. What does he do now? Now, listen, I'm not naive, ignorant, fanboy enough to just act like, oh, go land Belichick. But I will say this. I don't believe Kyle when he said that he slept on it the last couple nights and decided to relieve him of his duties this morning. Like I said, you guys know where I stand. I think this decision was made 2 months ago. It was already in his head because I've been there. So have you. When you stop believing in someone you're working with and you have any authority, it's hard to come back from that. And they do more and more things to lose your trust. Kyle Shanahan called a timeout in overtime when the 49ers were on defense because he didn't like the call. He's the offensive coordinator. That doesn't happen anywhere else in the league. Do you think Andy Reid would ever overrule Steve Spagnuolo in a defensive call in a big game, let alone any game? Of course not. I mean, what are we talking about? When that happened, it was clear that this guy has no trust in the player or the coach. Bill Belichick, Mike Shanahan, and Bill Belichick were very, very close when Mike was coaching in the NFL, obviously with the Broncos and then even Washington. When Bill was forced to get rid of Jimmy G by Kraft because of Tom Brady, he called one person and one person only. And it was out of the blue. And he said, Kyle, this is Bill Belichick. Kyle's like, I know. We will give you want Jimmy Garoppolo, second round pick. There's no negotiating. You got about an hour. Give me a call back. Because remember, a lot of other teams, the Browns, other teams were he wasn't even fucking around. He called Kyle because he's a big fan of the Shanahan. Now, I'm not acting like Bill Belichick even wants to be a coordinator. He should have been the head coach in Atlanta. Anyone that acts like Bill Belichick has lost his fastball. He just needs a better quarterback. Now, part of that's on him. He needs to give up personnel control. But if you watch Bill Belichick's team this year, their offense sucked. Their defense was fucking awesome. Belichick knows what he's doing, but no one hires him. Now, you know where I stand, where I thought what he should do is go to Amazon, be the broadcaster. But hell, that might go to like Jason Kelsey. It might not even be an option. Bill would be a waste in a studio show. I don't know about you. I don't watch any studio shows. Waste of my time. When the NFL, when games kick off 10 o'clock, or 11 o'clock or whatever time zone you're in, that's when I click it on. The Super Bowl, my girlfriend was like, let's watch the pregame show. I was like, no, I just watch Waste Management. And when we get the national anthem comes out, we'll turn on the Super Bowl. I despise pregame shows. I think they're such a waste. And I think Bill Belichick's way better than that. He's also hasn't missed an NFL training camp since 1975. It's 2024. I think if you're Kyle Shanahan, listen, Jed York runs in Silicon Valley circles. If Bill Belichick wanted 1 year, $35 million to coach, he'd give it to him. Now, would Bill do it? I don't know. But 100%, that's my first call. The second call is Mike Vrabel. Now, again, like Bill Belichick, has a lot of money, does not need this job. Now, the difference of Vrabel and Belichick is next year, I think Vrabel is 100% a lock to get a job. Whether he does TV, whether he just takes the year off and kicks it, he will get a job next year. That will happen. I do wonder if he gets bored, though. These guys, I love golf. I can't play them more than like 3 days in a row. I get bored. And I just talk about football. Football junkies like being around football. And the one thing Kyle provides to guys like that, because again, they will open a checkbook. This ain't the fucking Chargers. If Kyle goes, hey, we can get Bill Belichick $25 million for 1 year, they will cut the check. They operate, the budget ain't a problem. I mean, they had Jimmy Garoppolo making $25 million as a backup quarterback. So they don't mess around when it comes to financially. They're not going to worry about that. They don't pinch pennies. They have an unlimited amount of money. They are printing money with the 49ers. So you just make those two calls and you go, one, what would it cost to even get you interested? To me, that's the call. Those are the first two guys you call. I don't think Pete Carroll has any interest. But the difference is, like, I've watched Pete Carroll. Their defenses suck. Now, would you have to hire Pete Carroll if he wasn't interested? I guess you run his scheme or elements of it. But, like, I would be more inclined. Obviously, I'd rather have Belichick than Pete Carroll to run my defense and Vrabel. And again, I'm not saying they're going to take the job. I'm just saying those are your first two calls. Because the 49ers are not in a spot. And this is why I don't think that if he was going to fire Steve Wilks, he'd fire him blind. I think the moment Steve Wilks was fired, he knew he had a good shot at guy X or Y. And I think this has been playing out for a while. Like, I think those calls to those guys have been happening while the 49ers were in the playoffs. That's Kyle's job. You're negligent if you're not constantly working on that stuff. So, listen, there could be some names. If he hires Brandon Staley, they're both represented by the same guy, Richmond Flowers, I will throw up in my mouth. And I will be gutted. I do think that I'm not saying it's in play, but as long as they have an opening and there's connections, he's coached for McVay, that would make me fucking sick. I mean, I'd want to just go, I don't even know. Andy Dufresne crawl through, just the sewer Brandon Staley, but as long as he's out there, I mean, I just don't think they can hire a guy with no experience. Now, I don't think Brandon Staley's experience equals anything of value to me, but I know the way this league works. I know the way this world works. They're all kind of interconnected through an agency. That definitely makes me nervous. Like I said, I opened this saying Belichick or Vrabel, not thinking, I don't think he's going to get those guys. I'm just telling you, he's going to call those guys first and say, what's your price point? Knowing that he'd only have them for a year. Because right now the 49ers are in Super Bowl or bust mode. Period, point blank, end of story. Like that's just where they are in their operation. And they've proven they get right there. They just can't get over the hump. So no problem with the firing, 100% the right move. Now it's about upgrading that position, and we'll see what Kyle can do. He's had a really good track record of hiring coaches. I mean, he just lost a bunch of guys. Anthony Lynn just went to the Commanders. Daryl Tapp just went to the Commanders. Clint Kubiak, just went to run the New Orleans offense. It's hard. I mean, he's lost a lot of coaches over the years, but part of being a great coach is figuring out how to handle that. Andy Reid's done it for 2 decades. Lost a lot of coaches over the years and just kept on humming. So a lot of pressure on Kyle, a lot of pressure on the 49ers. This is, I don't know, depending on who you follow on the social media streets, like controversial, because it's not. This guy was gone, win or lose. Get in on the action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. New customers who deposit $5 or more can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,000 back in a bonus bet. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code JOHN. New customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,000 if your first bet loses. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN. The crown is yours. I was thinking about this last night. I saw Shaquille O'Neal had his number retired in Orlando. And anyone my age who was kind of coming in their own as a sports fan right around 92, 93, I think it's hard to quantify how big a deal Shaq was. Like relative to the NBA, there are only 2 guys in the NBA who like are on his level of fame, and that's LeBron and Steph Curry. He is infinitely more famous than every other guy in the league. Like Kevin Durant is not half as famous or impactful or as important to the NBA as Shaquille O'Neal. Obviously, Jokic might win his 3rd straight MVP. And one thing that kind of hit me, now the Warriors are kind of storming back. And listen, I'm someone, I don't watch Laker games, but I follow what they're doing. I mean, I hate them. And that emotion's powerful. Like if you're in the entertainment business, either love you or hate you, like you want one of those 2 emotions. And I think the NBA would be in a dramatically better place, despite having Adam Silver, who I don't think knows what he's doing, despite having all these teams tanking, despite having players sitting out once a week, if you just had the Lakers and Warriors as the 2 best teams in the league. It wouldn't be where it was 10 years ago, but it would be in a much healthier business place. We see when those 2 teams play, the ratings. I mean, they're huge. They're easily the 2 biggest brands right now in the NBA. Like, what about the Celtics? Well, I watched them play the Heat less than a month ago, and they got outrated by an SEC women's basketball game. No one watches the East. I mean, this is not a biased opinion. I don't, you don't, no one does. But dynasties matter. And that's why part of like the Lakers and Warriors being like the 9th and 8th seed are a problem, because you want your most famous players to also be on the best teams, because that creates the most, like, you want the guy at the top of the mountain with the sword, like, come and fucking try to take this from me. And that's what the NFL has right now with Patrick Mahomes. They had it for a long time. Like the NBA, when I was a kid, was so big because they had Michael Jordan, the top of that mountain with that sword, just slaying dudes as they attempted to knock him off his perch. And right now, that's Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. But the cool thing is, and listen, whether any of these guys are going to get him, we're all following their plight to see if they can. And to me, the number one guy who's going to have the chance, because he's gone toe-to-toe with them so many times, is Josh Allen. Like, is Josh Allen ever going to get it done? Lamar Jackson now has won multiple MVPs. Is he just going to become the James Harden of football? Or is he good enough? Is his team good enough to take down the Chiefs? Because we witnessed it a couple weeks ago. They definitely were not. And then you just go down the line. Like Joe Burrow, assuming he's healthy. Like I said earlier, that game he played against the 49ers this season, like that's as good of a football game as you can play. And we've seen him beat Mahomes before. But like he's got to stay on the field and sustain this. So he's like, he's not like kind of forgotten about, because I bring up Lamar and Josh and even Herbert all the time. And you're like, what about Burrow? It's like, well, he's disappeared. But you got following all these guys' stories, and it's happened so often in the sports that I've loved over the years. Like in basketball, you're kind of invested back in the day of Patrick Ewing or Reggie Miller or Karl Malone or Charles Barkley. Like, could they take him down? I'm a huge golf guy. Now, I lean Tiger Woods, but it was always cool to watch guys chase him and try to knock him off and not be able to. Like, that creates the emotion. That creates the hate. One reason the NFL, I think a huge reason for their success, dynasties really matter. And everyone chasing the Patriots for 20 plus years was important. I mean, it really was. It adds to the drama of this entire thing, which is essentially a television show. So even in the other conference, like, it makes it like, damn, could Jalen get back there? We've seen Jalen go toe to toe with him. Cowboys, if they could ever get over the hump, could you imagine the Dallas Cowboys against the Kansas City Chiefs? Brock Purdy and Kyle. So I think the NFL is in a very, very good space. And for the long-term health of the league, you could argue that the Chiefs winning that game and kind of cementing themselves as this little, 6-7 year dynasty is very healthy, because we know all the stories of the contenders. We've now been following all their careers for a while. Even Herbert, like getting Jim Harbaugh, they're going to go toe-to-toe twice a year. Promise you this. One or two of those games is going to be on Sunday Night Football or Monday Night Football or Thursday Night Football. Like those going to be Andy Reid, Jim Harbaugh, Herbert, Mahomes. Be a lot of eyeballs on those games. Like, the networks are going to want that bad boy. So I root for dynasties. Like, I root against someone. I've had it happen in my life. When I was young, I loved the Sacramento Kings. When I was in junior high and high school, and Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant and Phil Jackson used to make fun of Sacramento. Call us a little cow town, right? Ringing the bells, you fucking losers. And in fairness, they always won. Now, you could say it was rigged because of the mob back in Philadelphia with Tim Donaghy, but it happened. And it was a powerful thing. Everyone cared. We were all glued. So I'm very fascinated to watch these guys try to take on this guy. And the other thing is, like, Tiger Woods is back this weekend. Now, part of the reason he's back, he's launching a clothing line. It's his tournament. So it's not like he's just back purely because the love of the game. Obviously, he likes playing golf, but there are business interests involved in him playing this weekend. But, when he plays and you have everyone gunning for him, it just helps add something to the product. And I think once you become like a mythological figure, like, you can't be beat. Michael had it. Tiger had it. Even Brady ultimately had it, though he got beat a couple times in the Super Bowl. That's an element that you just maybe, if you believe the sport's rigged, then technically you could just create it in a lab. But I don't believe that. So when you get that organically, it helps take your sport to another level. And then last but not least, this is a little golf topic, but just an event topic in general. I didn't go to the Waste Management last week because I was in Vegas, and by the time I got home on Saturday afternoon, once we picked up the dog and came in the door, it was like 4:30, and I was so hungover, so tired. You couldn't have paid me to go to the grounds. And it was also freezing cold. When you promote, there's been a lot of controversy over the event has kind of jumped the shark. And even players said that the things that are getting said, it's just outrageous. And my initial pushback always is like, guys, this is what the money's for. Like, just shut the fuck up and hit the ball. Like, you guys are all getting paid an astronomical amount of money that, based on the television ratings, do not equate to what you're making. And then you start hearing some of the players talk about it kind of candidly from like, listen, I love this event. I plan on coming back, but just screaming in guys' backswing, saying just constantly mean stuff. Like, you kind of got to draw the line somewhere. And I remember when I was doing radio in the Bay Area, right before the 49ers built the new stadium and there was Candlestick and the Coliseum where the Niners and the Raiders played, they basically stopped doing preseason games, which make all the sense in the world when their two teams are 20 minutes away from each other to play each other in the preseason. But it got so violent and so unsafe that it was like, this isn't worth it anymore. So now, the 49ers are like playing the Packers in Minnesota in the preseason instead of just playing the team, across the bay, because someone might get killed I mean, seriously. So once you get to a point, and it wasn't because the teams were promoting violence, or like, hey, come to this preseason game and beat the shit out of the other team's fans. It was like everyone just kind of knew. And there's an element, preseason games are cheaper. A lot of people are drinking at these games. You're kind of going, there's a percentage of people going there looking for someone that I hope you would say something. And they just kind of exit out. And they stopped it. Now they played again this year, but they're in Vegas. It's a different crowd. Once you promote something, and let's face it, when alcohol is one of the driving forces, and I'm pro alcohol, I'm borderline, I don't normally drink. I'm a binge drinker. Like when I drink, I typically drink a lot or I don't drink at all. I'm not one of those guys like cocktail a night. I can go 2 weeks without touching alcohol and then have a weekend where it's like I had way too much. So everyone's different. But when you promote an event like the Waste Management does, that is a binge drinking event and celebrate it, and the PGA Tour does as well, like this is kind of what you get. Forever, Las Vegas was this place, and I guess it still is. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. I think New Orleans is a lot like that. And I would say Miami has some of that vibes. Like when you go there, you kind of do whatever you want. It doesn't count. Married, whatever you do, it's like just you leave, stays in Vegas. No one knows. I'd argue Vegas is so corporate now, and these casinos are so buttoned up. Like you really can't fuck around in the casino, right? You will get tossed out. You can't be like throwing drinks around, starting fights. Like that's not allowed. I guess in New Orleans or Miami a little bit. But one thing I think Scottsdale, and it's always had this vibe, but I think definitely for people on the West Coast in 2020, if you lived in California, you were completely locked down. You couldn't do shit. Arizona was not like that. Spent like 2 weeks, then it was rocking and rolling. It's one of the reasons when I came here in the summer of 2020, I'm like, God, these fucking people are just living normally. I'm coming here. I already liked it before, but that was the tipping point. I'm like, wait, we got the same air going. These people are completely living normal. I can't leave my house. All my friends that run businesses are closed down. I'm out. I'm coming here. And that's right when I knew. When I came here for a golf trip, Memorial Day weekend or President's Day weekend or one of those weekends, whatever the summer one is. And I was like, this is incredible. And I think this place, like I said, it's always been that. But I think the last 4 or 5 years and talking to people around here has really amplified becoming like a Vegas of what happens in Scottsdale stays in Scottsdale. It's become a big party town. It's like I said, always been a big party town. I think it's gone to another level. And especially with West Coast people, when you factor in what happened 4 or 5 years ago with everything that was happening in California, Oregon, and Washington, they treated the state a lot differently than this place, which is I'm glad. But now that everything is normal, I don't think it stopped here at all. So you're getting a crowd that is coming here ready for full debauchery, which I'm pro that. But the difference is a football game or a basketball game, if you're getting super wasted, you are in a seat. And a golf tournament, unless you're in a suite, is a little different. You're kind of on your feet. You're kind of walking around. And this was bound to have something bad happen. Listen, I don't have children, but if I did, would I feel safe taking them to a football game? And my answer would be, depends where we're sitting. Would I sit in the top bowl of, certain teams? No chance. Would I sit in the lower bowl or a suite? 100%. So listen, once your event becomes where you have to question, could I take my son to this? You got a problem. And I think Waste Management just kind of has to figure that out. It's hard because once you get the perception of like, come to Coachella, right? You're not going there to drink lemonade. You're going there to get wasted in some form or fashion. And everyone knows it. And that's what it's taken on. The documentary about 99 Woodstock, what did everyone go there for? Not to stay sober and listen to the tunes. So you get to a point where you either draw a line in the sand, and it's hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube, but I think they can do it. You just got to create a little different perception. Like this is not going to be tolerated. And I think it's hard because everyone is coming. And I know so many people like, yeah, I'm coming with my 3 boys, not like actual kids. They're boys from college that they work with. And we plan on getting wasted, which I'm all for. Do it a lot. But I think a lot of people, unlike me, when you start seeing fights, I've always done, whenever I see fights at a football game or fights, like there were a bunch of fights at the Waste Management, my first response is like, these guys are complete losers. But like, this is also a business problem. Like, you don't want that to be the case because you want your high end consumer, the guy bringing their son, even if it might, hey, he might not even have that much money. He might be extending himself to feel good about the experience because word of mouth matters.